At the 1 meter mark in the Think Park, a few years after Galileo died, Isaac Newton was born. Newton developed a language of mathematics called calculus that was like a combination of art and poetry that described motion. 150 years later, James Watt tamed the pressure of steam to make machines more powerful than many teams of horses. This invention opened up the doors to the Industrial Revolution. 50 years after that, Michael Faraday tamed the pressure of electrons to make machines even smaller than steam engines. Charles Babbage used electric machines to communicate with other electric machines to form computing machines. Mathematicians had now a tool that allowed them to model anything they wanted with formulas. This opened the door to the information revolution 35 years later. James Maxwell discovered that moving electrons in wires emitted a very bright invisible light, much like a tuning fork emits a sound. This emission radiated in space, traveling thousands of kilometers. He built devices that were able to detect this energy. Electric machines allowed man to communicate over great distances. This invention opened up the doors to the communication revolution. Within 300 years, man would describe the motion of atoms. Albert Einstein used computing machines and his imagination and intuition to refine Newton's formulas to describe the motion of protons, electrons, and atoms. He defined the relationship of mass and energy. His theories allowed man to build many very powerful machines like lasers and nuclear bombs that opened the door to the nuclear revolution and the communications revolution, allowing mass media to enter the scene. Music, like a drug, drove man to leap, but not to the highest, furthest, or most lucrative place, but to the most beautiful one. In the middle of the 18th century, superstar musicians entertaining kings gradually started to stretch their wings. Some who stretched found a degree of freedom that beckoned them on to heights never before reached. Haydn was one of the first to carve out roads still used by pioneers breaking new ground. With the push and the tug of Mozart, Beethoven, and Strauss, Liszt took these steps a leap further. He used music from gypsies singing and dancing around campfires under the glittering stars. He adapted his music to be played in golden-walled concert halls under glittering chandeliers so that it was heard by kings. This new feeling of freedom that this new music gave the people was enough to incite them to demand and fight for their political freedom and to rebel against injustices to the death. In 1848, there were a series of political upheavals called freedom revolts throughout Europe, which spread to South America. Over 50 countries were affected, but with no coordination or cooperation among the revolutionaries in the different countries, the revolutions collapsed after a year. The mass media became the message. The mass media that transmitted messages to the masses itself became no more than just a message, because the greedy people controlling the media started to control the messages as well. As cheap, meaningless messages were more profitable than valuable, useful ones, most of the messages brought little benefit to mankind. The people became complacent and preferred to see and listen instead of to read and write. It was seen that controlling people with the media was more effective than controlling them with fear. And just when the mass media devices became available to exploit, they were exploited by two very greedy and brutal leaders called Hitler and Stalin. By 1939, the two were able to use fear with mass media to brainwash people all over the world to fear and hate and kill each other. Stalin slaughtered over 6 million people like cattle for fear of opposing political views. Hitler burned 6 million Jews in ovens for fear of contamination of race. The richest of the Jews managed to escape to America, where they prospered. Judea was given back to the Jews as compensation for being almost exterminated. Their land was wasted in their absence, and they soon restored it to its former glory and made it fertile once more. They disenfranchised the inhabitants and renamed the land Israel. We cannot know the future for certain, except for the fact that everything living dies and everything non-living gets cold, disintegrates, and gets spread out over space. We can often learn from the past and be able to better guess what lies ahead. Continents keep moving, and it is not possible to change their momentum and movement. Africa continues to slide over and into Europe, and in 100,000 years the Mediterranean Sea will have dried up. In 1,000,000 years, technetium 99, the waste byproduct of the present nuclear power plants, which possess a danger when inhaled, will have decayed and will have ceased to be a threat. Several kilometer-sized asteroids and comets on collision courses with Earth, however, will become a new and even greater threat to man's well-being, if he is still here to be threatened. In 100,000,000 years, the continents we are so familiar with will be unrecognizable. In 1,000,000,000 years, as if to celebrate the evolution of fish, plants, and fungi from the sponges 2 billion years before, the sun will become too hot for life of any kind. It will evaporate the oceans, and man will be forced to leave Earth and look for new solar systems to exploit. The last one to leave will have no need to turn off the lights.